Welcome back to your mats. Today we're going to look at Ardha Hanuman Asana, which basically means half monkey. Now this is one of the poses that when I'm teaching in a class full of people and I say that we're going to take it into half monkey, there's quite a few groans. Now I think one of the reasons why that is because it's a hamstring stretch, and a lot of us have a lot of tightness down the back of the legs. And although sometimes when we come into poses that target those areas of tightness and stiffness, there might be an area of discomfort, we never want it to be on that painful spectrum. And I think this is one of those poses of where people get a little bit too hooked up on what it should look like, as opposed to trying to find that stretch that is actually stretching through the hamstrings. So I've got a few props here just to show you ways of making it a little bit more comfortable. Got blanket, 2 blocks. If you don't have that, don't worry, there's other things around the house that you might be able to use instead. So I'm going to show you first of all. Normally you can come into this pose from either 3-legged dog or from all fours or even to low lunge. I'm going to step my left leg forward. I'm going to stretch the left leg first of all. So what I want you to do is don't worry too much about getting that front leg straight. So that's one of the things that I see all the time, is people are cranking themselves all the way down, almost locking that knee joint straight. Now, that's not necessarily going to cause you any problems, but you are therefore then using your joint strength to keep you there, not necessarily building strength. I also, when I'm teaching class, I always cue not to lock your joints, just because I have a few people in my class that I know that are hypermobile, so they just need that conscious cue not to push their legs or their joints kind of past straight. So I want you to really try and find a position here of where you feel that stretch in the back of the leg. Now personally, if I sit all the way down, this looks like I've got really open hamstrings, which is a little bit false because my hamstrings are always an area of tightness. However, when I sit down like this, I do not feel any stretch in my hamstrings at all. Because my hamstrings are tight, therefore I want to try and find that stretch. I don't want to just sit casually in a pose, looking like I'm doing yoga, but not really activating anything. If you can come all the way down here and you do feel a stretch in your hamstrings, brilliant. But what I want you to try and do is find that position of where you can feel that stretch down the back of the leg. Feels like a good stretch. It might be a little bit uncomfortable, but it's not painful. So for me, I actually find I get more of a stretch if the leg is bent. And then I focus on pulling the toes towards me. It just gets a little bit more engagement down the back of the leg. Now, so the first thing that I see in class is people are really trying to crank that leg straight. Not necessarily. Another one is, in order to try and fold, people round their shoulders and kind of like lose their neck towards their shoulders. So still think about creating that length. You're pushing the crown of the head away from your bum. Squeeze the front of the hips to sink a little bit deeper. So we're getting the hip flexors involved. If you're finding it uncomfortable on that back knee that's down on the ground, you can always use a blanket, a cushion, or maybe a jumper and just rest it under your knee. You can, if you want to, have more of a stretch in that back leg, is tuck the toes, press the knee away and then sit back. So you're just increasing the distance between the foot and the knee. If you find it hard when you come in this position to keep your back straight, what you can do is just use some yoga blocks. It gives you a little bit of an extra height, so it means that you're not really collapsing over that front leg. So they're the ways that you can try and make the pose a little bit more comfortable, adaptable for you. Now this might be a little bit controversial in the yoga world. We're often told to square the hips off. So left hip back, right hip forward, keep the hip squares. The thing that I've got a problem with this is your hamstrings are actually made up of 3 muscles. And sometimes in yoga, we get so focused on that linear movement that we're constantly targeting the center. We're not really working all range of the hamstrings. So when you're in this position in class, maybe just slightly press your hips from one side to the other. It does not have to be a big movement. But just notice, maybe if you push the hips out to the right, you get a little bit more of a better stretch in the hips. Try not to always stay in static positions. You kind of need to look for that stretch that your body needs. Perfect. Now just to even myself out a little bit, I'm just going to switch sides when we continue. And if on one side to the other you need a little bit more blocks or you need a little bit more props, use them. It doesn't matter. We all hold imbalances. The key here is just to be grateful for what movement your body does have and adapt to each side as you need to. So another thing that you can do in your half monkey, if you want a little bit more engagement in the hamstrings, and this is a really good way of building strength in the back of the legs, make sure your leg is bent. I want you to press the heel of the foot down into the ground and try and pull it back towards you. And just notice how the muscles in the legs get a little bit more engagement. Squeeze your glutes, squeeze the front of the hip. So if you're someone who comes into half monkey and you don't really feel much of a stretch but you want to, by pressing that heel down, pulling it back, come into more of a kinetic stretch is definitely going to help you. That being said, by having that extra bit of engagement, that's what's going to help build strength in those hamstrings. And often when we have tight hamstrings, we can get that a little bit confused with just thinking it's stiffness when actually it's a weakness and we need to build strength there. So, key things in half monkey, make it comfortable. We're not trying to fold ourselves in half with the leg out straight in front. Have the leg as bent as you need, pull the toes towards you, and then engage the muscles in the legs by trying to pull that heel back, squeeze the glutes, support the spine in doing so, and just have a little bit more of a play with it. Try not to get stuck in that linear movement. Move the hips from side to side, see where you can find that bigger and better stretch.
Chingity ching, it's Dominic the donkey.